Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe we can get started very soon. Got some people still coming in, but get everybody to have a seat. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I wanted to welcome the visitors and guests, honored guests, for tonight's lecture on Alois Musil's adventures. Before we get started with his adventures, I'd like to mention a few adventures for Dr. Robert Schick. He's an independent scholar who has devoted the bulk of his academic career to the history and archaeology of Jordan in the late Roman and Islamic periods, with a focus on southern Jordan, with a second interest in the Islamic sites and monuments of Jerusalem. He received his PhD from the University of Chicago in 1987, with a study on the Christian communities in Palestine from Byzantine to Islamic rule, and he has participated in numerous seasons of excavations in Jordan since 1980. He's a freelance translator of scholarly literature from German and Arabic into English, including the 8 German volumes by Gustav Dahlmann about Palestinian folk customs, written 100 years ago. He taught archaeology courses at the Palestinian Al-Quds University and Birzeit University between 1995 and 1998. And he taught Islamic studies in Hyderabad, India, from 2000 to 2006. He was based at the University of Mainz from 2014 to 2019. So I'd like you all to welcome Dr. Robert Schick.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction and welcome to all of you in the audience who came for my talk. It's my current research project at ACOR to prepare an English translation of Alois Musil's travel account of his expedition, traveling around explorations in southern Jordan between the years 1896 and 1902, at a time when he was the first archaeologist to systematically travel around in southern Jordan with the objective of identifying all the various archaeological sites and monuments and geographical features in southern Jordan. So he was the first one to do that in a comprehensive, systematic manner. Okay, now, some of you may have attended previous lectures of mine and know that I like to go off on tangents and tell humorous anecdotes related to the topic. And I've got a handout here, just a few copies if people really want to have the handout, which provides the quotes from Musil's travel account for some of the anecdotes that I will bring up during my presentation. So if you want to see the full quote, you can pick up a copy after the lecture. Okay, so Alois Musil was born in Moravia, which was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time. It's now part of what is the Czech Republic in Eastern Europe. So he's a native speaker of Czech, also fluent in German and English and other languages. And he originally was a student of theology, and he was ordained as a Roman Catholic priest in 1891, but wanted then to continue his theological studies. And he then studied further at the École Biblique in Jerusalem in 1895. And while there, he got the idea of traveling around in the neighboring countries. And he started off traveling in southern Jordan in the following year, 1896. And then between 1896 and 1902, he off and on traveled in southern Jordan and other areas. He went back to Europe and then he'd come back and travel some more in Jordan. So it's not a continuous, 6 years that he's traveling, but for the bulk of that time, he's going on briefer times of travel. And then not only did he travel extensively and comprehensively in southern Jordan, he also traveled northern Jordan, Syria, Iraq, northern Arabia, up until World War I, and up until specifically 1917. And he was a soldier in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I. And he's sort of the counterpoint of Lawrence of Arabia for the British. He's doing the same thing for the Austro-Hungarian army in the Middle East. So he is an active soldier during World War I. And then after the First World War, he returns to, Czechoslovakia and never returned to the Middle East. After that, he became a professor at the University of Prague, where he spent then his latter part of his career writing, the publications of his decades of travel in the Middle East. Now, he published his travels in southern Jordan between 1896 and 1902 in 3 volumes in German called Arabia Petraea. Volume 1 dealing with, Moab, the area north of the Wadi Mojib up to, Hesban is the farthest north he got. Volume 2, Edom, the area south of the Wadi Mojib. Excuse me, yes, it's Wadi Hessa, sorry, yes, Wadi Hessa, down, to Aqaba and the Negev area of southern Palestine. And then he published as a separate volume his ethnographic observations in volume 3, the Ethnological Travel Report. So he has volumes 1 and 2 give the details of his daily itinerary and what he sees, what places he goes to, what he records. And then volume 3 is a topical presentation of ethnographic observations. Now, he published these books in German. Most of his other publications were in English. And so his English language publications are much better known than his books in German. And especially his ethnographic observations. He wrote a famous book, well known for people who are interested in ethnography, The Manners and Customs of the Rowella Bedouins. These are the Bedouins who are up in northeastern part of Jordan, published in English in 1928, based on his time spent with the Rowella Bedouin prior to World War I. And this book has become a classic of ethnographic literature that anybody interested in the topic will be very much familiar with. Now, that's well-deserved that people know about it. It's just the problem with volume 3 of his Arabia Petraea volume, because it's in German, nobody knows about it. Almost nobody ever cites it. It has fallen into complete oblivion. And there's a handful of German scholars who cite it. But otherwise, I only know of one English-speaking scholar who has ever extensively cited the book. I have not yet come across a single Arabic-speaking author or Jordanian author who has ever cited his volume 3 of ethnographic observation. So it has completely fallen into oblivion, and it's part of my hope with my project to produce an English translation that I can rescue, well, Musil's 3 volumes, but especially the 3rd volume, from being so totally forgotten. Okay, now in the course of his travel, he produced detailed maps of the area that he was traveling through. And this map shows sort of the triangulation points that he used to take bearings of which sites where. And you can see it goes up to just north of the Dead Sea, all the way south to Aqaba, and then a good part of southern Palestine. He spent the bulk of his time east of the Jordan, east of the Arba Valley, but he did include the area between Gaza and the southern areas as well. So while he's traveling around, he's taking observations, he's writing down place names, every Jebel, every Khirba, every Ain, every Wadi. He's recording the name and what direction it's flowing and what archaeological sites are nearby. So he's providing all sorts of details, and he's got a surveying equipment that allows him to take compass directions and produce these maps. And here's the northern half of the map that he produced in the course of his explorations. Now, this map also very few people know about. When people are referring to maps, this often gets overlooked. In this case, this was not sold as part of the 3 volumes of the Arabia Petraea volumes. You had to buy it separately. So libraries might have the 3 volumes, or they don't have the map. But thanks to modern technology and scanning of documents, you can find the map on the internet easily enough. But before scanning and the internet became a thing, you almost would never be able to find a copy of this detailed map. And then here's the southern half of his map, where he has all of the wadis and ains and jebels and whatever that he describes in his book, labeled on the map, so you can tell where he's been going easily enough. And then this is his map of Petra. He was the first person to get to Petra to start the complete documentation of all of the sites, rock-cut tombs, other monuments in Petra. Now, it'll be a year later that the Germans, Bruno and von Tomaszewski, come and do the complete itinerary description of all of the monuments. And Musil is cooperating with that German project of Bruno and von Tomaszewski to record everything. He's independent. The Germans are a separate project. He's separate, but they are coordinating what they do. So when the Germans come, they don't duplicate what Musil did. Musil focused his attention on the Dare Plateau, where the Dare Monastery is. That area is what Musil did. And when Bruno and von Tomaszewski came, they simply took over, incorporated what he had already done in their own plan. So we have then the larger map based on what Bruno and von Tomaszewski did, including what Musil had recorded himself. Now, this effort of Musil to record everything on the Dare Plateau provides me with my first opportunity to tell a humorous anecdote. Now, you might notice the label here. Wadi Musa al-Fatuma. That's his name that he gives to the Dare monument. Everybody else who's ever written about the Dare monument call it Dare, the monastery. But he calls it Fatuma. Now, Fatuma is a nickname for the Muslim woman's name, Fatima. And I see a Fatima right there in the audience who can be called Fatuma. I've heard people call her Fatuma as a nickname. Okay, so why on earth did he call, or did the locals tell him that the name of a dare was Al-Fatuma? Well, that's remained something of a mystery. Well, there was another scholar, Tawfiq Kanan, in the 1930s, came to Petra and wrote an article about place names in Petra. And he asked the locals, why did Musil call this Dare monument Al-Fatuma? And the locals told him a story that it's named for a gypsy woman named Fatuma who performed an exotic dance in front of the monument. What? What on earth? Why would a gypsy woman performing an exotic dance be so impressive that the locals would decide to name the Dare monument after her? Well, it's weird. But then Musil, elsewhere in his text, when he's in Wadi Faynan, observes a performance by a gypsy woman who he says every gypsy woman who does a dance performance is automatically given the name Fatuma. Well, no. Well, 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 okay. Okay. Well, he goes, well, so when he's in Faynan, he observes this gypsy woman do a tightrope act. She sets two poles in the ground, and then ties a rope tightly between the two poles and walks back and forth. So this circus act of walking on a tightrope, it was her act in Faynan. So, well, I still find it rather odd that this was so impressive that according to the local informants who told Musil this story, that is the basis for the dare being called Fatuma in his writing and nobody else's writing. Now, other people have told me that there is a Jebel Fatuma not so far away, but I have yet to see it on anybody's map labeled Jebel Fatuma. I mean, Cynthia Finlayson told me today, well, it's Jebel Fatuma. But I have yet to see a map where Jebel Fatuma is labeled. Well, I like to tell the story about this exotic gypsy woman as the origin of the name. Well, anyway, so getting back to what Musil is doing, he also took hundreds of photographs during his travels. Now, he's not the first person to take photographs in Jordan. that would be people in the 1870s, 20, 30 years before Musil's time is when you start to have people taking photographs. And he's also not the first person to take photographs in Petra or elsewhere in southern Jordan. That would be Archibald Forder, who was based in Kerak as a British medical missionary starting in 1890. He's the first person to take photos in southern Jordan. But Musil has the first large collection of photographs of Jordan. Archibald Forder's photographs are mostly lost, and then there's only a few that were ever published that we know of that survive. So Musil has the first large collection of photographs. And here we have this panorama view of the city of Kerak in 1896 at the start of Musil's travels. And you can just see, the citadel and the city on the hill and just nothing else surrounding it. So anyway, so then Musil takes a very important photograph on the birthday of the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II. The governor of Kerak asks Musil to please take a photograph of the parade in front of the Ottoman government building in front of the citadel. This is on the 31st of August, 1896, where then you get all of the soldiers and employees lined up, and then have Musil take the photograph. And this is the second photograph that he took in commemoration of the Sultan's birthday. Now, my next humorous anecdote is what Musil reports about the reaction of the locals to the Ottomans all lining up to get this photograph taken. It seems that virtually no one among the locals knew what a photograph is, knew what a camera was, had ever seen a photograph. So this is a strange event where the Ottomans just sort of line up, stand straight, and face this box that Musil looks through for some mysterious purpose. And so the locals, who are very carefully observing just what the Ottomans are up to, and they're very carefully analyzing our relationships. Who's in charge, who's giving the orders, who are the subordinates. And so when Musil gets up and tells everybody where to stand, and stand there and stand up straight and face the camera, he's giving the orders. And even the Ottoman governor obeys Musil's orders about where to stand. And so they are sort of surprised, mystified by Musil. How is it that he is the most important person who's giving the orders that even the governor obeys? Well, and so then after they take the photograph, Musil goes on his way, and on two separate occasions in the following days, he will arrive at some Bedouin encampment. The first time in the Wadi Hassa, where the sheikh recognizes him as, you're that guy who was in Kerak ordering people where, so who are you? When they see him in this Bedouin camp in the Wadi Hassa. And the sheikh tells how he saw Musil ordering the governor where to stand, what to do, and the Bedouin are sort of surprised. I say, "Mashallah, what is going on here?" But the sheikh assures them that this has happened, and well, they're all kind of amazed. And then he goes to Wadi Musa, and he's in LG, and this happens again. The local sheikh there recognizes Musil as that guy in Kerak who can order the governor to do what he says. And well, everybody's amazed. And well, so clearly nobody in southern Jordan knows what a photograph is at this point. And so this is just one indication of the new dispensation that the Ottoman government brings with them when they establish their renewed administration of southern Jordan. Well, it's 1894, the end of 1894, when the Ottomans established their administration in Kerak again. And so Musil is taking this photograph less than 2 years after the Ottomans have reestablished themselves, and the locals are facing a whole new situation, and they're having to make adjustments and discovering things they didn't know about before. Okay, so this is the most maybe significant photograph that Musil took during his travels. And so he's going around in southern Jordan, going everywhere in the course of those years. And he stops. He's at a lot of places where he is the first person to write details about a lot of the archaeological sites. He's perhaps most famous as the first person to get to Quseir Amra. That's his big discovery, but there are lots of other places where he is the first person to get to. And Rabba is one of them, where he writes multiple pages about what is to be found in Rabba. He's the first person in Feynan. He's the first person at Qasr Tubba, other places as well. So here he is at Rabba. He draws a overall site plan and takes photographs. And he also makes a observation that is of some interest, that he notices that the locals are digging up in the ruins of the various buildings in Rabba, and they're removing paving stones and marble panels, some of which have inscriptions on them, which the locals promptly destroy. It seems that the Ottoman governor, who was a prominent, a well-educated, cultured individual, has issued an order that any antiquities that are found are the property of the Ottoman government, which leads the locals to immediately destroy anything they find. So, well, this is the first indication I have ever found of there being some sort of interest by the government in antiquities in Jordan. When the governor of Kerak issues this regulation that any antiquity that's found belongs to the government, and especially inscriptions are the property of the government. So the locals respond by immediately destroying them. And so Musil comments, well, if this keeps up, there's going to be nothing left once archaeologists come and do a lengthy investigation. Everything will already be destroyed. So, well, it's regrettable. And that is actually the case in Rabba. It's remarkable how few inscriptions have ever been found there. Rabba was the major city of the Kerak Plateau in Byzantine times, not Kerak. Rabba was the most important, largest city in Byzantine times. Kerak becomes the most important city in the Kerak Plateau only with the Crusades. Before that, Rabba, and how many inscriptions have ever been found in Kerak? Well, precious few. Well, as Musil records, because they're all just getting destroyed by locals to keep them out of the hands of the government. Okay, well, okay. Now, there are other changes that the Ottoman government brings to southern Jordan. And in the year 1900, they set up a telegraph line. There had been a telegraph from Damascus, wherever, to as far as the Salt, but in 1900, they extend the telegraph line from the Salt south to Kerak, to Fila, to Shobak, down to Aqaba. And Musil happens to pass by right at the time when the Ottoman soldiers are trying to get the telegraph poles set up so that the line can be established. And he's in the Wadi Walla, between Madaba and the Wadi Mojib, when he observes how the locals are fleeing to avoid having the Ottoman army confiscate their camels and donkeys to transport these telegraph poles. Because quite sensibly, the locals disappear with their animals to prevent the Ottomans from confiscating them. And so he has a paragraph about how the locals, are doing everything to avoid having their animals confiscated. Well, and so that brought to mind, yes, the scene from the Petra Church mosaic from the 6th century, where you've got the locals proudly including in the mosaic floor the scene of the camels trying to transport wooden roof beams. In this case, it's such a major accomplishment to get this bulky sized piece of wood that they're proud of and that they're putting in their mosaic. The depiction of them transporting roof beams on the camels. So the Byzantines had the same kind of awkward situation that the locals have in the year 1900 when they're trying to transport telegraph poles to set up the telegraph line from the Salt going down to Aqaba. So logistic problems are universal. Same thing that the Byzantines are doing in the 6th century, the locals have to face in 1900. Okay, so we then, among other places he goes, and takes photographs, draws a plan, is the Ottoman Hajj fort at Katrana. And when he gets there, he has an unexpected experience where he's getting his camera set up when he hears a voice speaking in French, calling out to him, "Bonjour, bienvenue." And that is the last thing Musil is expecting to hear from somebody in Katrana, speaking French to him. Well, it turns out the custodian of the Ottoman Hajj fort is someone from Algeria who had lived in France for a number of years, had fought in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, 1871, and eventually finds himself in Syria and offers his services to the Ottoman governor in Damascus, who appoints him to be the custodian of the Ottoman Hajj fort in Katrana. where then he has been serving for years now by himself, his young daughter, and a slave. He says are the three members of the garrison of the Ottoman Hajj fort, except for the days when the Hajj caravan from Damascus passes through. There'll be a half dozen Ottoman soldiers joining him who are part of the caravan going on the Hajj. Otherwise, he's by himself for the bulk of the year. This Algerian who's the unexpected person in taking care of the Hajj fort. Well, then Musil takes lots of other photographs of sort of daily life scene. Here's in Madaba, the girl elementary school students. This is run by the Catholic Church in Madaba. So we have the class photo with one of the few schools for girls in Jordan at the time. So that he's taking a photo. And then another photo of hairstyles. What kind of hairdo do people want to have in Madaba here? We've got this boy with this, hair, and the girls with that style. Okay, so there's a lot of ethnographic photos that he's taking in addition to archaeological sites and buildings and geographical features. He's taking a lot of photographs of people. Here's just one example of an anthropological ethnographic photo. And then Musil spends a large part of volume 3 dealing with poetry. And he has a photo here of a reciter of poetry playing a rababa in one of the Bedouin tents. And he records then well over 1,000 lines of poetry. He, records in transliteration the Arabic text, and then he translates the poetry. And this, as far as I'm aware, is by far the earliest large collection of Arabic poetry in Jordan. In who else is, excuse me, that are recorded? What books? I've not found anything that has, well, I'm going to end by at the end saying, well, this is something that you have to look into because it's beyond my awareness of records of poetry. And he has this photo of two of the Bedouins disputing the authorship of a particular verse. Now, all of these verses are recorded and transmitted orally, and you have the possibilities of alternative versions. And here there's a photo of a dispute about who is genuinely the author of a particular verse. Okay, and then, well, this is just a couple pages where Musil is recording the poetry that he's recording, and he records how he, has his informants repeating carefully the verses so he can get the wording right, and they discuss at length what the verses mean. And he's also recording the music, the melody to which the rababa player is playing as they're singing these songs. And I have not found anybody earlier than this recording or writing down music. Oh, can you think of a case of music? Yes. 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 Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well. Mm, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Well. Anyway, I mean, I have not looked extensively, but I have found no earlier documentation of music than this, which is being published in 1908 based on his travels up to 1902. And so he's got, well over 1,000, I mean, dozens and dozens of pages of this poetry that he is recording. And then he has a page, this is just one sample of this page where he is listing famous poets. And if you want, that handout, if you want to get a copy, that I've included the entire page of all of the couple of dozen names of poets that Musil knows about. And I was going to end at this point and invite you people to investigate whether any of these poets have any corpus of poetry that is still extant. Is it too late now, 120 years after Musil's there? Is there any poetry that can be attributed to any of these people? And I mean, that kind of a question is way beyond my abilities. And so it'd be up to you people to pick up on that topic. Are there any poems attributable to any of these individuals? And so that's one value that I can see to my attempt to rescue from oblivion Musil's writings by preparing this English translation, and especially his volume 3 of ethnographic observations, which deserve to be better known than they are. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Now comes the good part of questions. And I think we have the microphone here. SD.
Actually, you caught my attention with the Fatuma thing. Fatuma means Fatima.
Yes.
And Petra has backstage, routes that you can go from the Dead Sea, but it's closed by the government because you have to have. أنا دكتور أمجد داود.
Okay.
But if you go to Petra, don't go to the route, the local route, the one that gives you, go the back route from the Dead Sea.
Okay.
It's very steep, but however, you will be near the Bedouin that you're talking about.
Yes. Okay.
And it's the easiest probably to go to the monastery. And, if you take some roads, you'll end up there. This is a monolithic structure. Actually, it's like the headstones in Britain.
Okay.
It is prehistoric.
Okay.
Some civilization that spread these in Inca and in Southern America, in Mali, in Africa, in Europe, and England, and one of them happened to be in Jordan.
Okay.
So what you brought up is very interesting. Very little information known about it, but you can actually find the route. Okay, you can find out and you can visit it, and you will be amazed by the inscriptions that on those walls while you are going on that route. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for
okay,
the
okay.
lecture. Yeah,
Yes.
I want to ask the question about in Madaba when there were the children,
The
girls.
girl students,
Yeah,
yes.
what year was that? And the hair, also the hairstyles. What year was that? Also, do you think that the dance that they were talking about, was it about a special ritual or something, or just like that was it? Thank you.
Well, the only bit, I mean, about this being this exotic dance that Fatuma performed comes from, one sentence in Tawfiq Kanan's article, Place Names of Petra. Now, Musil has his paragraph about gypsy women who are invariably called Fatuma when he's in the Wadi Faynan, and how she does this tightrope act. So there's a paragraph in Musil's account of the day that he happens to be in Faynan. How common her performance is, or whatever, it's just speculation beyond what can be supported by the paragraph in Musil and Faynan and the sentence by Tawfiq Khan in Petra. So I have no way of addressing your question. Oh, all of his photographs I show you date between 1896 and 1902. He goes to Madaba repeatedly. They'll sometimes be his starting point. He'll stay with the Roman Catholic priest in Madaba and then start a travel and come back. So I couldn't narrow it between 1896 and 1902. Just has to be within that 6-year period.
Thank you, Robert, for this, very interesting, let's say, lecture. Maybe it happens to be that maybe I'm one of few people who read also the third volume in German.
Oh, okay.
And I need just to comment on some of the
Okay.
points you raised. First of all, with the dancing issue, I
Yes.
think maybe some would agree with me that up to the 60s, just
Yes.
50, 60 years ago, it was a common practice in South Jordan
Yeah.
to have gypsy women, Noriyat, for entertainment. And
Okay.
they used to go from one, let's say, encampment to another, just to, let's say, to have a wedding, let's say, celebration or whatsoever. And that was very,
Okay.
very common in southern Jordan. We up to 70s, even late 70s, something like that.
Yes.
The second thing, I think, I, in a certain period of time, read many of the books that, let's say, documented the encounters between the Western travelers
Yes.
and the locals
Okay.
in Jordan. And I think Musil was maybe one of the first to really, in an ethnographic way, to really document names and
Yes.
in a very, let's say, deep way,
Yes.
because he spent longer time in the region.
Yes.
Whereas other travelers, they took it sometimes from the person who escorted them
Yes.
to the region. And
Yes.
that's a very problematic issue because, the tribes,
Yes.
they had their conflicts at that time. So if you have someone coming with you, guiding you from a certain tribe and passing by another one, they always wouldn't tell the truth. The second thing is that Musil is someone who documented the region around Petra, as you really mentioned, in a very specific way. And with the map, which, as you mentioned, Canaan later, because Canaan is the first ethnographic study of the Petra region as a whole. I think the project you're doing, translating the third pen, the German one, is really very important one. I noticed that sometimes there is a critical role, archaeologist,
Mhm,
and I want to say Western archaeologists in the Petrov region
mhm.
have played in the interpretation of those encounters.
Okay.
Sometimes, I'm not referring now to Mosul issue, sometimes in a connection with the region. Because if you, for example, go to a place and you, let's say, hear a story in the modern time, you will interpret it in a different way from a local. So sometimes me reading the encounters between the different travelers to the Petra region and the locals, my understanding as a local
Yes,
who knows the oral history of the region
yes,
is completely different from the interpretation of someone reading it just or, listening to someone else or whatsoever.
yes.
I mean, maybe it's beyond this presentation. This is very critical, especially that in the region of Petra, there are current conflicts based on claiming the past.
Okay.
You know, all the communities around Petra, they claim to be descendants of the Nabateans in order to have more access to the site.
Yes.
And I think that Mosul is someone who really documented it in a very, let's say, without bias, in a very good way. So we can very much profit from that. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, Musil immerses himself in the local culture more deeply than any of the other travelers. Well, Ulrich Seetzen in 1805, 1806 was the first. He is sort of like Seetzen, immersing himself as best he can into the local culture, doing everything that the locals do, not trying to be different than locals. A lot of the other travelers, well, they're Westerners, they have a Western way of doing things, and so they don't fully integrate themselves the way Seetzen did, and then, well, Burckhardt sort of, and then use of the others don't. So, well, yes, I mean, that's always a question when the foreigners who are not native to the culture are trying to understand what's going on. They're dependent often on what the local informants are telling them. Anyway, so well, I mean, that's a whole methodological concern when you're doing ethnographic research.
Let me give you a research first.
Well, use the microphone.
Yeah, let me give you a research trail. It's called the 7 layers of veil, or 7 layers or something.
Okay.
Just remember that in Madaba, they invented this belly dancing. It's Herod something
Well, yes.
in Nebo mountain.
Salome. Yes.
Remember, this is a country where actually, like goes back pre-Christ.
Yes.
And it happened in it, one of the most famous killing in the world, which is called the 7 veils.
Yes.
The dance
yes,
of the 7
the
veils.
7 veils.
You can actually go to research that trail, and you're going to find that, it's
Okay.
not very uncommon that you will find in 20 kilos that you'll find in Petra somebody that would, like worship something along those lines, which is Fatima or Fatuma or whatever. So this mountain that you mentioned is very interesting, and it has very little information about it other than Bidul in Petra. But I can tell you that I followed that trail before.
Okay.
Yeah, and I tried to find out actually why it was called, and I can share with you.
Well, I'd
And,
very much
yeah.
like to know. Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Robert. I am
Yes.
Senator Jamal Sarayla from Karak. Really, thank you very much for the lecture. But I want to ask you, you have mentioned that Rabba was the capital of that area, Karak, before Karak.
Yes.
Do you have an evidence of that, and what are the dates? And that maybe justifies when المجال يصير الحنة والكراكية.
Yeah.
ف-
Well, okay, both Rabba and Kerak and other cities in the Kerak Plateau are important. It just seems, from what I can judge, Rabba is the leading city. Well, both Rabba and Kerak are bishoprics. But somehow I get the strong impression that Rabba is the more important city. And it's only when the Crusaders come and build their Crusader castle at Kerak that Kerak becomes indisputably the most important place in the Kerak Plateau. Now, maybe this is a subtle evaluation of, not so abundant historical sources and whatnot, but well, that's another question. Okay. Well, if I can take a moment to answer some of the questions online. Okay. Yes, the project to have my translation finished, I've got the draft of all 3 volumes finished, the translation, but I need to have it reviewed by another native speaker of German to verify I've got the nuances. So then ACOR has, in principle, agreed to translate to publish the 3 volumes, but getting from my having completed the draft translation to having ACOR publish the books, it's going to be, I suppose, a couple of years from now. Because my draft does need reviewing and then stylistic editing and proofreading and then more proofreading and the index. And I've been working with Nadia Suchtian in the audience there with Gustav Dahlmann's volumes, and it takes years to get all of this done. So well, it'll eventually happen, but don't hold your breath for any time in the next year or 2. Okay, another question about Musil in his military uniform has lots of medals. What those medals are for are way beyond my awareness or ability to answer. You'd have to go to records of the First World War, and I suppose there are documents in the military archives of the Austro-Hungarian, Department of Defense in Vienna or Prague where you could track this down. But that is so totally beyond anything I am the least bit competent in, that I have no idea of actually what he did during his military career during the First World War and what he got all these medals for. Okay, a question. How eccentric was he? Well, very eccentric. Who else? How many other people want to go traveling around the way he did for years and years? Now, his family background is fairly ordinary. He's not from a prominent family in what is now the Czech Republic, but he obviously was extraordinarily intelligent. He was fluent in multiple languages, not just Czech and German and English. He's Italian and he knows Arabic, fluently. And he says something, there's like 14 languages he's fluent in. So, okay, now other questions.
I think that's all the time we have.
Well, okay.
But I think you could maybe answer those via email or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. We thank you all.